He called her a rotting expense while standing in her home, eating her groceries. Miriam Dalton, stroke survivor and widow, didn't flinch. Brian, her smug son-in-law, whispered about fast-tracking her declines to the nurse, within earshot. By Friday, he and Kara would be standing on the front lawn with eviction papers in their hands. They'd borrowed her house, her silence, and her kindness for too long. Now she was done lending, and the title deed agreed. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. He whispered to the nurse like Miriam Dalton wasn't even there, like the medical recliner had swallowed her into silence. But she heard him. She always heard more than they thought. Morning light filtered through the curtained window of the in-law suite, resting in soft streaks across Miriam's blanket-covered legs. The oxygen concentrator hummed faintly beside her. Across the room, Cecilia Cho took her vitals with quiet efficiency. Pulse, temperature, oxygen, routine, familiar, comforting. Then the door opened with a click. Brian Ross entered like he owned the walls. No knock, just a flick of his wrist on the handle, and 2 entitled steps into the room. He smelled like expensive cologne and last night's bourbon. Cecilia didn't greet him. He leaned in toward her clipboard, feigning concern. "Is there any way to fast-track this?" he asked, his voice low, sharp around the edges. "She's basically a rotting expense." Cecilia stiffened. Miriam's eyes opened. Slowly, one at a time. The left always lagged since the stroke, but the message in her stare was unmistakable. The silence that followed felt unnatural. Thicker than the air, Cecilia's voice was level. "That's not a conversation I'm qualified to have, Mr. Ross." Brian glanced at Miriam, then at the floor, then back to the nurse with a forced chuckle. "Just trying to get a sense of things. She sleeps a lot. Thought maybe it meant." His voice trailed off as Kara Dalton Ross appeared in the doorway, talking into her phone. "No, the brunch is Saturday now." "Yes, I'll bring the spinach salad, hang on." She stopped mid-sentence, her smile faltering as she stepped into the tension. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Brian said quickly, straightening. "Just checking in on your mother." Miriam blinked, slow and even. Kara breezed past him, balancing her phone and tote bag. "I'll heat up some of the quiche later, Mom. It's the good one from Trader Joe's." Miriam said nothing. Cecilia's hand lingered on Miriam's wrist for a second longer than necessary before pulling back. Her eyes met Miriam's. A silent question passed between them. "I'll be back Friday, unless something changes," she said. "You know how to reach me." Miriam nodded just once. Cecilia left without acknowledging Brian again. The quiet that followed was almost surgical. Upstairs, Kara's footsteps faded toward her office. Brian's heavy tread moved toward the garage. Miriam waited. When the silence settled, she reached slowly for the phone on the table beside her chair. Her fingers were slow but precise. A message lit up the screen. "Cecilia, I can document that if you want. Happy to submit behavior report anonymously." Miriam stared at the text for a long beat. Her thumb tapped deliberately. "Miriam, yes." Then she turned to the small side cabinet under the lamp table. Her hand reached behind the curtain's hem, pulling free a brass key sewn into the fabric. Inside the bottom drawer sat a narrow lockbox. She opened it without hesitation. She removed the thick blue folder marked Dalton Living Trust, Originals. Each document inside was tabbed, labeled, pristine. Title deed, power of attorney, healthcare directives, banking information. Every asset, every clause, untouched and still hers. On top sat an envelope. Howard Ames, written in her late husband's script. A man her husband once called the only lawyer I'd trust to close the world behind me. She laid the folder across her lap, adjusted the recliner upright, and picked up the landline phone with unshaking fingers. 3 rings. Howard Ames came the calm voice on the other end. "This is Miriam Dalton," she said. "We're moving forward, quietly." The smell of lemon oil lingered in the room as Miriam unlatched the leather folio. Her fingers, stiff from age and insult, moved with deliberate care across the embossed lettering. Dalton Living Trust. Outside, wind stirred the ash trees lining the quiet Fort Collins cul-de-sac. Inside, the truth sat in her lap, black ink on crisp paper, unaffected by sentiment. The title deed was exactly where she'd left it, filed under the D tab. The home, every inch of it, was owned solely by the trust in her name. No joint ownership, no mortgage, no legal claim from Kara or Brian. Just a quiet clause beneath the signature line, occupants designated as residential licensees, no tenancy conveyed. Miriam stared at that sentence like it was a sermon. They hadn't earned a stake. They had borrowed her oxygen and wallpapered it with entitlement. A notification blinked on her tablet. It was Howard. Howard Ames, good news. You can list or sell without notification. Full legal authority remains with you. Her jaw tightened, but her voice was even when she called back. Let's begin the process. Quietly, like we discussed. Understood, he replied. We'll create a holding LLC in your name. Give me 48 hours. She exhaled slowly. Howard. Yes? Make it one with no sentimental name. Nothing they'd recognize. The next day, Ellie pulled into the driveway in her navy Honda, the same one Miriam helped her buy last year. The girl carried a milk crate full of cables and a laptop bag. Her hair in a high bun, earbuds half dangling from one ear. You still want everything digitized? Ellie asked, stepping into the cool air of the in-law suite. Miriam nodded from her chair. Label everything except what's already mine. Ellie arched a brow. How will I know? Trust me. You'll know. They worked side by side for hours. Ellie scanning, naming, archiving. Miriam sorting documents into piles with quiet decisiveness. Old tax returns, insurance policies, letters from her husband written in ballpoint ink. The oxygen machine hummed steadily beside them, the only sound besides the clicking of keys and the occasional satisfied exhale when a file synced correctly. Halfway through, Ellie stopped and held up a photo. Miriam and her late husband standing on the front porch, the sold sign freshly planted in the yard behind them. You looked powerful, Ellie said softly. I was, Miriam said. I still am. At dusk, Ellie loaded 3 boxes into the car, copies not originals. The wind had picked up, and the porch light flickered against the early evening. Across the street, Mr. Reardon sat on his porch swing, sipping a tumbler of something amber. He raised his eyebrows in quiet observation. Miriam met his gaze through the front window. He nodded toward the driveway like a jurist affirming a verdict. She gave the faintest return nod, almost imperceptible. As Ellie pulled away, the porch light clicked off. Miriam locked the deadbolt behind her and returned to her chair. She placed the remaining originals back in the safe, her hands steady now, her breathing slow. A ping echoed from the tablet beside her. Howard Ames, LLC and listing documents ready. Just say when. Brian stood at the kitchen island, hunched over a manila folder like it owed him something. Numbers, highlighter marks, post-it tabs, it was all there in a flurry of performative concern. She's on 15 pills a day, he muttered. 15. Do you know what that costs in bulk? Add in meal services, nurse check-ins, transportation fees. It's excessive. For what? Miriam heard it from the in-law suite, the half-shut pocket door doing little to muffle voices. Her hearing wasn't what it used to be, but clarity had a way of slipping through when the truth was sharp enough. Kara's voice joined, brittle with the wear of someone who had long stopped listening to herself. She doesn't even eat that much. Half the time we're throwing food out. I don't get it. I do, Brian snapped, running a hand through his thinning hair. She's draining resources slowly. It's like waiting for a tap to run dry. No one's replacing the pipe. He laughed, once flat and bitter. In the suite, Miriam sat in her recliner, pulse oximeter still clipped to her finger. Her face remained calm, but her thumb pressed against the call button for Cecilia. Cecilia arrived 10 minutes later, the scent of lavender soap still fresh on her scrubs. She took Miriam's vitals in silence, then leaned in after confirming the numbers were steady. I heard what he said, Cecilia whispered. Again, this time I'm filing a behavior note. His language toward you violates caregiver guidelines. And frankly, he's not safe around patients. Miriam gave a small nod. Cecilia held her gaze. Do you want me to include the comment from last week about spoon feeding into the grave? Yes, Miriam said softly. I'll draft it tonight. That evening, as the house settled into its usual hush, Kara scrolling on her tablet in bed, Brian nursing whiskey in the garage. Miriam opened her laptop. Her fingers moved with the calm precision of someone who had spent decades balancing checkbooks by hand. She logged into the trust's bank portal and pulled up the monthly expense statements. The utilities, the groceries, the landscaper who never edged the back path right. Every line item filtered into a neat spreadsheet under her name. Every expense for the household, Kara and Brian included, was still being routed through her trust. She hovered over the budget summary, $6,482.93 this month alone. Half of it for services they barely acknowledged. She clicked export and saved the file under a new folder titled Q1 Final. When Ellie called from campus, the ringtone was low and harp-like. Hi, Nana, came the soft voice. Everything okay today? Miriam smiled. I'm about to be. There was a pause on the line, just long enough for shared understanding to travel without words. Let me know if you want me to come home this weekend, Ellie said. I'll clear it with my professor. Not yet, Miriam said. But soon. The next morning, Miriam's inbox pinged at 6:47 a.m. Subject line, all cash buyer. No contingencies from Fort Collins Realty Group. Good morning, Miss Dalton. A client is interested in your LLC property listing. Full cash, quiet closing. No contingencies. Interested in a walkthrough Sunday. Please advise. Miriam sipped her tea without blinking. The ceramic cup warmed both hands. She didn't smile, but her fingers drummed once, twice, against the rim before setting it back down. She tapped out a reply in 3 clean lines. Sunday is acceptable. Confirm final terms. Proceed quietly. They thought her quiet meant she was slipping. That silence was surrender. But Miriam Dalton wasn't fading. She was finalizing. On Thursday morning, her hands rested calmly on the table as she watched the cursor blink at the bottom of the PDF. The purchase agreement filled the screen, 6 figures, clean terms, buyer's signature already in place, LLC listed as seller. No inspections, no contingencies. Closing in 7 days. Howard had moved fast. He always did when Miriam asked without elaboration. Let me know when it's signed, his message read. Miriam clicked the stylus pen from its side holder. She scrolled to the signature line and signed. The tablet chimed softly, signed and filed. Later that afternoon, Ellie arrived with her laptop slung over one shoulder and a bag of groceries in the other. I brought almond milk, your sleepy time tea, and she paused with a grin. A password manager. Miriam raised an eyebrow. Ellie set up shop at the dining nook and opened 3 devices. You're too trusting, Nana. Everything needs a different password now. Nothing with your birth year. No middle names. No flower references. I'm locking down your email, your bank access, even your calendar. Miriam leaned back in her chair. You always were the only one who knew what needed locking. Ellie looked up. Serious now. I just want you safe. By Sunday, the household vibrated with misplaced confidence. Kara flitted between the stove and the fridge, her voice a steady stream of self-congratulation as she laid out mini quiches and a smoked salmon platter for a casual brunch. I still can't believe they gave Brian that retention bonus, she said, refilling a mimosa with an extra glug of champagne. We might finally be able to redo the kitchen next year. He says we're in the top tier now. Brian walked in, fresh from a shower, slapping his Apple Watch like he'd won something. Locked in a 2-year contract and equity points. Told you. Miriam sat at the edge of the room, cardigan draped neatly around her shoulders, fingers wrapped loosely around her tea. She smiled. Not a wide smile. Just a precise, practiced one. Not a word spoken. By Monday morning, fresh flowers sat in a narrow vase beside her recliner. White tulips, cut low. The sun cast long golden angles across the suite floor. Cecilia arrived at her usual time, pausing as she took in the change. Something happen? She asked, adjusting the blood pressure cuff. Miriam met her eyes. I made room. Cecilia said nothing more, but her hands moved a little more gently than usual. Down the hall, the coffee machine sputtered as Brian typed at the breakfast bar, scrolling through emails with one finger and sipping from a chipped mug. Then a new alert appeared, flashing red at the top of the screen. Mortgage portal alert. Account activity suspended. He stared at it. Clicked it. The screen refreshed error. Then again. Same result. Babe, he called, blinking. Hey, do you know what this is about? The portal's locked. Kara appeared in her robe, wiping lotion onto her hands. What portal? Brian didn't answer. His face had gone strangely still. In the in-law suite, Miriam leaned back in her chair, her eyes closed, breathing slow. The tulips had opened just slightly in the sunlight. The slam of the front door rattled a framed photo off kilter. Brian charged into the living room, fist clenched around a sheaf of printouts. The edges crumpled, ink still smudged from a rush print job. His breath came fast, short bursts like a cornered animal. You sold the house? He barked, holding the papers up as if the font itself had betrayed him. Is this real? You sold the goddamn house? Miriam sat in her recliner, feet flat on the floor, robe pressed, hands calmly folded over a leather-bound notebook. She didn't flinch. Her voice was soft, but each syllable landed with surgical accuracy. No, I sold my house, she corrected. You merely lived here. The silence that followed was dense, like humidity before a summer storm. Kara rushed in, face pale, mouth already forming a protest. Mom, what's going on? This has to be some sort of mistake. Miriam's head turned, her gaze stiller than steel. No mistake, but we're your family, Kara pleaded, her voice cracking just enough to sound real. Family, Miriam repeated, her lip curling at the word. Family doesn't whisper expiration dates. Family doesn't calculate what I cost per month. Family doesn't ask a nurse if I can be fast-tracked to the end. Brian's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down, suddenly more interested in the carpet's pattern. Across the room, Ellie stood quietly by the front door, phone angled discreetly at her side, screen glowing red, recording. Her eyes never left her grandmother's face. Upstairs, Cecilia moved with efficiency. She knew the signs: bruising anger, coercive control, financial entitlement disguised as concern. When she logged her shift report that afternoon, she did what she hadn't done in 30 years of nursing. She filed a formal APS report. Patient subjected to verbal degradation, indirect threats, financial coercion, mentally sound, autonomously protective, caregiver recommendation, relocation and protection of legal authority. She printed a copy and slipped it into a sealed envelope addressed to Howard Ames. The next morning, Howard's voice was steady, but charged as he called Miriam on the secured line. You're within every legal right. The eviction clause is bulletproof under the living trust. How long? Miriam asked. 5 days to vacate. Starting today, enforceable by sheriff's office if needed. I've prepared the delivery. Miriam nodded. Send it. By noon, a courier arrived. Kara opened the door, mascara smudged, a housecoat barely tied. The envelope was cream-colored, stamped with Howard's firm seal. Inside, the formal notice to vacate. Delivered to Brian and Kara Ross, residential licensees. Language precise. Deadline listed in bold: Friday, 5 p.m. Kara sank onto the hallway bench, reading it twice before her hands started shaking. Brian stood over her, jaw locked, unable to speak. His chest rose and fell like he'd just realized no one was coming to save them. That evening, as shadows lengthened over the neighborhood, Kara stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Hi, yes, it's Kara. I know it's short notice, but, well, it's complicated. We need a place to stay for a bit, maybe just a couple weeks. No, it's not permanent. No, I didn't know she'd do this. Pause. Another call. Then another. Each conversation ended the same way. Sympathetic silence, then rejection. From the porch next door, Mr. Reardon watched through his reading glasses, sipping his evening bourbon. He didn't wave. He simply observed. Inside, Miriam rested in her recliner. A fresh folder on her lap labeled post-closing transition. Tulips still sat on the table beside her, now beginning to bend at the stems, timing like revenge, ripening quietly. By morning, the air in the kitchen had a different weight. It wasn't just tension, it was proof. Taped cleanly to the refrigerator, with a magnet shaped like a miniature cowboy boot, was the official notice. Occupants must vacate by Friday, 5 p.m. The paper was crisp, not a single wrinkle. Howard had drafted it himself, meticulously worded, notarized, and enforceable. At the bottom, in bold ink, it read, Dalton Living Trust, primary holder, Miriam C. Dalton. Kara stood frozen in front of it, robe half-tied, coffee growing cold in her hand. Brian walked in, stopped short when he saw her, and then followed her line of sight. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, his voice low and flat. This is war." Before Kara could answer, Ellie stepped into the room, earbuds still hanging from her neck. She glanced at the fridge, blinked once, then turned to leave. Brian's voice snapped like a whip. "Ellie, talk to her. She's not thinking straight." Ellie stopped just past the threshold, her back still to him. "She's not confused," she said. Then she walked away. In the in-law suite, Cecilia quietly helped Miriam fold the last of her cardigans into cedar-lined drawers. Every item that belonged to Miriam, photos, medication, documents, heirlooms, was now in the newly remodeled space. No chaos, no overlap, just deliberate separation. "You're sure about Friday?" Cecilia asked gently. Miriam nodded. "They've had 23 years of borrowed ground. 5 days is generous." Cecilia didn't argue. Instead, she handed over a fresh printed copy of her APS filing, tucked neatly into a manila folder. "It's filed. Time-stamped. If they escalate, you're covered." Miriam looked up. "Thank you. I don't intend to be the next headline. Just the last word." Later that afternoon, Mr. Reardon stepped across the front yard in a navy windbreaker, discreet envelope in hand. He didn't knock, just handed it through the screen door when Miriam answered. "Security contact," he said. "Retired law enforcement. Discreet, local. I already told him the basics." Miriam took the envelope and gave a slight nod. "Appreciated." He leaned slightly closer. "If they act up, don't hesitate. You're not alone." Upstairs, Kara sat cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by shoeboxes of photos. Old birthdays, lake trips, baby Ellie swaddled in Miriam's arms. Her fingers hovered over one frame. Her eyes were glassy. She looked up when she heard footsteps. Miriam in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "You really going through with this?" Kara asked, voice ragged. "After everything?" Miriam's expression didn't soften. "Take what was yours, leave what wasn't." Kara's lips parted, but no sound followed. Cecilia arrived early the next morning, clipboard in hand, crisp in pale blue scrubs. She placed 2 chairs by the in-law suite's door, one for herself, one for Miriam. Her presence wasn't medical today, it was protective. "Vacate day," she said lightly. "Let's keep it clean." Miriam sipped her tea, her voice calm. "It's already clean. They just never noticed." In the hallway upstairs, Brian hovered by Miriam's old study. Door cracked open. He glanced around. No one watching. Inside, the tall oak filing cabinet sat like a silent sentinel. He stepped in, tugged the top drawer. Locked. He dropped to his knees, tried the second. Nothing. Then he grabbed the handle, with both hands, and yanked. A hard clack echoed. Still shut, his jaw clenched. He spotted a butter knife on the desk, snatched it, and started to wedge it into the seam with trembling fingers. He didn't hear the soft footsteps behind him. Brian wedged the butter knife deeper into the seam of the filing cabinet, knuckles white. His breath came faster now, not from effort, but from the pulsing realization that he didn't know what she kept locked in here. Paperwork? Bank slips? Leverage? The metal creaked slightly, but the drawer didn't budge. He shifted angles, scraping the edge against the paint. It screeched in protest, a sound that bit into the silence of the upstairs hallway. He didn't care. "Come on," he hissed under his breath. "Open." The voice came from behind him, low, precise. "That's federal fraud, by the way." He froze. Miriam stood in the doorway, dressed in a soft slate cardigan and her house slippers, holding a glass of water steady in one hand. Her expression was unshaken. Cool, even. Not a hint of alarm. Brian dropped the butter knife like it burned. "I was just looking for tax papers. For Kara." Miriam stepped closer, eyes never leaving his. "They're filed. Professionally, and not for you." There was no raised voice, no trembling rage, just clarity, like a courtroom gavel, post-verdict. Within the hour, Howard had a courier at the door with a letter bearing the Dalton Living Trust seal. The language was direct. Any attempt to tamper with, access, or replicate legal or financial documents without authorization will be referred for prosecution under Colorado statute. Brian read it once, then twice. He balled it in his fist and dropped it in the trash, but didn't touch the cabinet again. That afternoon, Ellie arrived with a manila folder under her arm and quiet fire behind her eyes. "This is from me," she said, handing it to Miriam. Miriam opened it. Inside, her granddaughter's signed testimony, time-stamped, notarized, and cleanly printed on college letterhead. A single sentence on the cover page read, "This account is true to the best of my knowledge and offered freely." Miriam looked up. Ellie just nodded. "In case it ever comes to that." Later, in the in-law suite, Cecilia walked Miriam through a printed packet, highlighted, numbered, folded into quadrants. "Eviction day is Friday. Movers arrive at 10. I'll be posted here from 8. EMT on standby for protocol, just in case he makes a scene." Miriam sipped her tea, then folded the packet shut. "You think he will?" Cecilia hesitated. "He's loud, not brave, but he's prideful. That's the part I don't trust." Miriam nodded. "Then we prepare like he will." That evening, Mr. Reardon appeared on the back patio. He didn't stay long, just passed Miriam a brown leather case with a small silver key attached. "Hard drives," he said. "Encrypted, labeled, 2 backups, stored in my safe if needed." Miriam accepted it without fanfare. "You were always prepared for things to go sideways." Mr. Reardon gave a tight smile. "It's not paranoia when you've seen enough probate court." He turned, but then paused. "By the way, Ellie's sharp, keeps her cards close, but she's watching everything." "I know," Miriam said. "She's the only one who ever really did." That night, Miriam sat alone at her desk, the locked filing cabinet now standing silently to her left. She ran her fingers over the brass label on the top drawer. Beneath it, in etched engraving, were the words M. Dalton, personal, not transferable. The doorbell rang at precisely 8:45 p.m. Cecilia answered it. A courier stood with a sleek blue envelope, hand-delivered, no return address. She brought it in. Miriam opened it carefully. Inside, a single typed line on realtor letterhead, "Buyer walkthrough scheduled Sunday 11 a.m. Miriam folded it once, neatly, and set it atop her planner. The smell of lemon polish clung too thickly in the air, cheap cover for panic. Kara darted between rooms, fluffing throw pillows, rearranging coffee table books by color gradient, and spritzing lavender mist like it could erase uncertainty. A faux silk runner trailed down the dining table. She adjusted it 3 times. The buyers were due in 30 minutes. She lit candles she hadn't touched in 2 years. "It should feel lived in," she muttered. "Warm. Ours." In the corner of the living room, the family portrait was back on the mantel. Brian's idea. Smiling faces. Filtered lighting. A time they barely remembered. Except it wasn't theirs. Not anymore. In the converted in-law suite, Miriam sat with Cecilia, reviewing the day's sequence. Her fingers traced the rim of a porcelain teacup, ivory with a faint gold rim, the last of a matching set. Cecilia gestured toward the wall clock. They'll be here any minute. You sure you don't want me in the room when they meet Brian? Miriam didn't look up. They won't. He'll avoid them. Or growl in the garage. A soft chime echoed through the hallway. Doorbell. Cecilia rose and answered, leading in a couple in their late 40s, both dressed in smart fleece and trail shoes. Fort Collins casual with tidy manners. The woman extended a hand. Miss Dalton? Miriam stood slowly, carefully, steady. Yes. Welcome. This half of the home has already been vacated. I'll remain in the suite, under retained rights. Everything's documented. The man glanced at the folder in his hand. We saw the paperwork. It's impressively clean. No liens, Miriam said. No legacy mess. Just square footage and boundaries. Then gently and clarity. In the living room, Kara lingered behind the kitchen island, hands stiff on a serving tray of untouched croissants. She heard voices but didn't move toward them. She wasn't introduced. Ellie stood near the hallway and powered on the digital photo frame. Tap, tap, tap. Image after image flickered past. Kara at the beach. Brian holding a grill tong like a trophy. A wine night selfie, blurred and beaming. Ellie tapped once more. Delete. The screen went black. She took the frame, unplugged it, and slid it quietly into a drawer. In the garage, Brian stood in the far corner, breathing through his teeth. Sweat had pooled beneath his collar, despite the 58-degree afternoon. He stared at a dusty rake, leaning against the water heater, fists clenched, jaw twitching. Miriam opened the door, paused, then stepped just inside. I'd ask if you're all right, she said, but I think you know better than to lie to me. Brian didn't turn. You enjoy this, don't you? She walked over, eyes on the scattered mess. Half-packed bins, a deflated air mattress, a broken ceramic birdhouse. Kara had meant to fix 2 Christmases ago. I enjoy accuracy, she said. This isn't your home. It never was. You lived here, like renters with attitude. Then, calm as ever, she reached behind her, pulled the door closed, and left him with the echoes of his own bitterness. Cecilia moved through the rooms quietly, phone in hand, documenting condition photos, walls, outlets, baseboards. Her camera shutter clicked softly as she took a final pass through the guest room and sunroom, pausing only once to photograph the blank space above the mantel, where a portrait had just been removed. The buyers stood by the front steps now, nodding, smiling. They understood the situation. They'd never even asked about Kara or Brian. Back inside, Kara spotted the folded envelope on the counter, simple, white, with her name in cursive. Not warm, not angry, just unmistakable. She opened it slowly. This was a gift you mistook for permanence. You were guests, not heirs. You've now been returned to real time. The letter sat on the kitchen island, beneath a ceramic fruit bowl Kara had never liked but never replaced. A single sheet of cream stationery folded in thirds. No seal, no salutation, no flourish. Just Miriam's handwriting, precise and spare. Brian was the one who opened it. Kara stood behind him, arms crossed like armor. This was not revenge. This was reminder. You were guests. No signature, no affection, no denial. Brian's lips curled. She thinks she's some kind of queen? He tore the letter in half. Then again, and again, the pieces fluttered to the floor like pale confetti over scorched earth. Kara didn't speak. Her throat clicked when she swallowed. She dropped into a chair and pressed her palms against her eyes. A ragged sob slipped through anyway. Across town, Ellie helped Miriam into a soft shawl and wrapped her hand gently around the wheelchair handle. I thought we'd try that new cafe near Laurel, Ellie said. They have lemon scones. Miriam tilted her chin. As long as the tea is hot. Scalding, Ellie promised. Outside, the October breeze cut through sunbeams like threads of silver. It smelled of wood smoke and decaying pine needles. Miriam inhaled like she hadn't breathed in years. Behind them, the movers filed in, uniformed, efficient, unfazed by tension. They'd been briefed by Howard. No interaction, no delay. Loud and clear. Inside, Cecilia stood near the bay window, arms folded across her cardigan. She watched Kara pace, watched Brian stomp from room to room, muttering, watched Ellie's absence register like a betrayal. Then the doorbell rang. The buyers arrived with smiles and coffees in hand. A real estate agent handed over a folder, keys clipped neatly to the inside pocket. "We're thrilled," the woman said, eyes scanning the space. "There's a clarity here, like someone finally opened the windows." Cecilia nodded. That would be Miriam. No drama, no haggling, no frantic cleanup, just clean documents, signed deeds, and silence thick as velvet. Back at the cafe, Ellie stirred honey into Miriam's chamomile. They sat by the window, the glass slightly fogged from warmth against the autumn chill. Cups clinked. A table nearby burst into laughter. The waitress refilled their water glasses without being asked. "I'm staying on part-time," Cecilia had offered earlier that morning, "if you want company or protection." Miriam hadn't hesitated. "I'd like that." Ellie sipped her tea. "They'll never understand," she murmured, "how gentle this really was." Miriam didn't reply. She just held her cup with both hands, letting the heat press into her joints, letting the quiet mean something. At the house? No, the former house. Brian stood near the mailbox, staring at his phone. His jaw clenched, then unhinged, slack with disbelief. Kara watched from the front step. "What now?" He held up the screen. "Application denied. For the apartment near Drake." "What? Why?" Brian didn't answer. He didn't need to. Inside his inbox sat a formal notification, a line in bold from the property manager. "Due to recent incident reports and verifiable public records, we are unable to offer tenancy at this time." Back in her suite, Miriam unpacked her teacup. The good one, the only one that had survived the marriage, the widowhood, the stroke, the guests. She placed it in her new cabinet beside a fresh tin of Earl Grey. Nothing was broken. Everything was removed. The final transfer occurred on a rainy Wednesday morning. Ink on paper, initials beside every clause, no room for interpretation. Miriam's signature was steady, unshaken. The deed passed cleanly to the new owners, but with one clause intact, her irrevocable right to remain in the in-law suite, life estate protected, unchallenged. Howard had worded it so tightly even a termite wouldn't find a loophole. Miriam closed the file folder and slid it into her locking cabinet. Her name still lived on the title, just in a smaller corner now. She didn't need the house. She only needed the part no one else had ever valued, the quiet space at the back where she'd healed from her stroke, alone. Later that afternoon, a small welcome basket arrived on her side of the porch. The new owners, a retired couple from Durango, had left a handwritten card beside a bundle of white lilies. "Miss Dalton, we hope you always feel at home. We're grateful for how gracefully you've managed this transition. Warmly, the Kirbys." Miriam lifted the tissue paper. Inside, raspberry preserves, a box of English breakfast tea, and the jar of rosemary-infused honey. She smiled. They weren't trying to claim her. They were acknowledging her. Across town, Kara gripped her phone like it might give birth to a second chance. The text to Ellie had gone through, but it was met with silence. Just read and a timestamp. No reply. She sent another, "I know things got heated. I never meant for it to go this far." Still nothing. Not even a typing bubble. Meanwhile, Brian had taken to forums, whispering venom into comment sections and neighborhood apps. He painted himself as a wronged son-in-law, cast out unfairly by a manipulative matriarch. But within hours, the posts were scrubbed. Each one met with a formal takedown order, electronically stamped with Howard Ames' name and the letterhead of the Dalton Trust. Cease and desist issued on behalf of Miriam Dalton. Continued defamatory or libelous activity will incur litigation. Brian slammed his laptop shut. The world was not on his side anymore. Cecilia, from the nurse's lounge at the clinic, scrolled past a viral Reddit thread someone had screenshotted. It was a local story gone national. Sweet older woman kicks out freeloading family, sells house from under them, and keeps the title to her own suite. The top comment, legend, followed by she's a real one. And then Miriam is the standard. Protect her at all costs. Cecilia chuckled and set down her phone. She brewed herself a cup of peppermint tea, then opened her planner to reschedule Miriam's next wellness check. Later that week, as dusk blanketed the neighborhood, Mr. Reardon called out from across the street. Feel like losing at chess tonight? Miriam stepped out onto her porch in a thick cardigan, her cane tapping softly on the wood. I feel like reminding you what checkmate looks like, she said. He laughed, deep and warm. I'm getting slower. You're getting dangerous. She joined him at the table under the awning. The game opened in silence, pawns inching forward, tension easing with each move. When she returned to her suite just past 9, Miriam spotted a pale pink envelope tucked beneath the doorframe. No stamp, no handwriting on the front. She carried it inside and opened it carefully. No letter, just a single pressed flower, a forget-me-not, nestled inside soft tissue paper. A slip of notepaper folded beneath it read, "Still watching, still learning." The envelope had been so simple, Miriam nearly missed it among the junk mail. A pale cream square with no return address, no embellishments. Inside was the pressed forget-me-not, and beneath it, a small note in Ellie's careful handwriting. You taught me what a line looks like, and how to draw it. Miriam stared at the slip of paper for a full minute, not with tears, but with stillness. The kind of silence that replaces grief with recognition. Ellie started visiting every Thursday. No fanfare, no awkward apologies, no updates on Kara. She came bearing bagels and lavender-scented hand cream, her laptop tucked under her arm, and her eyes full of calm resolve. Miriam never asked where she went when she wasn't here. Ellie never volunteered. It was an unspoken pact, one grounded in mutual understanding. One afternoon, while they shared mint tea in the backyard, Ellie looked out over the rosemary bush and said, "You taught me boundaries don't mean cruelty, just clarity." Miriam only replied, "And clarity is an heirloom too few inherit." The suite began to shift with the seasons. Miriam, emboldened by her newfound peace, hired a painter and chose a soft blue-gray for the walls, something between dignity and sky. The sharp beiges Kara had picked were gone, covered cleanly with 2 coats and the scent of change. Cecilia arrived one Saturday morning with a brushed brass plaque and a small drill. "Where should I hang it?" she asked, holding up the rectangle. The engraving was simple, tasteful, private residence. M. Dalton, just to the right of the doorframe, Miriam said, where no one can ignore it on the way in. Cecilia drilled it in place, brushing away the wood dust with her palm. "There, you're officially untouchable." By Tuesday, Howard arrived in his pressed blazer with the final paperwork in a brown leather folio. "The last filings are complete," he said, handing her the signed summary. "The trust is closed. The LLC has dissolved into final sale. You, Miss Dalton, are now the sole legal occupant and life estate holder." Miriam took the pen from him and signed once more. "That's the last signature," he said. "No," she corrected. "That's the first one that wasn't under duress." He nodded slowly. "I stand corrected." That night, as the porch fan hummed low and dusk wrapped around the neighborhood like a shawl, Mr. Reardon stopped by carrying a mason jar of iced tea and a half smile. "You seem lighter," he observed, settling into the opposite rocking chair. Miriam sipped slowly. "I'm not." He arched a brow. "I'm rightful," she clarified. "There's a difference." He grinned, then tapped a pawn across their shared chessboard. "Well then, show me how the rightful move." At precisely 9:42 p.m., her phone buzzed once, the name on the screen, Kara, no message, just the incoming call, frozen in mid-ring. Miriam watched it vibrate against the table for a few seconds. She didn't flinch. Her thumb moved deliberately, one press, blocked. No ceremony, no announcement, just the click of a decision, years in the making. The phrase had echoed in her skull for weeks. Rotting expense. But Miriam didn't repeat it. She recorded it. Not on paper, not in court, in legacy. Her handwriting flowed slowly across the page of her new will. The pen moved with the elegance of certainty, her fingers steady, line after line, clause after clause, all carefully typed, reviewed, and countersigned with Howard's assistance. When it was done, only one name remained as beneficiary. Eleanor Grace Ross. No trace of Kara, no clause for Brian, not even a courtesy mention. Decay wasn't part of her estate plan. The next morning, Cecilia arrived with a carton of labeled folders and a portable scanner. The dining room table, once Kara's altar to fake hospitality, was now an island of legal clarity. Color-coded tabs, Cecilia said, sorting with brisk precision. Yellow for medical, green for trust, pink for letters of instruction. Miriam sat across from her, sipping coffee from a pale ceramic mug marked with her initials, a birthday gift from Ellie, years ago. No floral pattern, just bold black letters. Permanent. Together they filled the binder, living will, power of attorney, property deeds, advance directive. No gaps, no ambiguity, no opportunities for reinterpretation. Feels like armor, Miriam murmured. Cecilia nodded. Because it is. That night, Miriam pulled a fresh journal from her desk drawer. A hard-bound book with a linen cover and gold-edged pages. She opened it to the first clean sheet and titled it in careful script, The Recovery Chapter. The ink soaked into the paper like roots finding their way through earth. She wrote not about anger, but reclamation. Not grief, but grounding. She was not trying to make sense of what happened. She was recording how she survived it and why that mattered. 2 nights later, she lit the stove herself. The kitchen smelled of rosemary, garlic, and soft butter. Lamb chops seared in her old cast-iron skillet, asparagus roasted alongside potatoes in the oven. She wore a simple navy dress and an apron stitched with faded embroidery. Cecilia arrived first, holding a small bottle of elderflower tonic. Mr. Reardon came second, hat in hand, eyebrows raised. Smells like something that belongs in the Sunday paper, Miriam grinned. Only if they put me on the front page. They ate slowly, talked gently. The air was still, and somewhere around dessert, a modest apple tart. Miriam realized she hadn't thought of Brian or Kara in 3 full hours. That, she thought, is a kind of miracle too. The following afternoon, Ellie arrived with a glass vase of spring tulips, tight at the bud and eager to bloom. She placed it near the kitchen window, where light broke clean across the counter. There was a card tucked beneath the stems. You didn't just survive, you reclaimed. Love always. Miriam didn't cry. She pressed the card flat between her palms, closed her eyes, and inhaled the scent of the tulips, sweet, green, and alive. No trace of rot, only return. Later, as twilight spilled across the yard, she stepped onto the back porch and made her way to the garden. The soil was dry but rich, the beds still marked by the wooden stakes Brian once promised to replace and never did. Miriam knelt slowly, fingertips breaking into the earth with purpose. She watered every patch of rosemary, mint, and lavender, plants she once used, once forgot. She whispered to the roots like old friends. Then, with the porch light humming gently behind her, Miriam sat back down at her desk. She opened her ancient laptop, now secured with the password Ellie installed, and logged into her long-abandoned social media profile. The banner still showed a photo of her with Kara and Brian, awkwardly smiling at a wedding they'd barely invited her to. She deleted it. Then she posted a simple update. Still here, still titled. She hit post, closed the lid, and leaned back. Miriam didn't wait for death to define her legacy. She rewrote it, clause by clause, while the blood still moved warm in her hands. She sat at the polished oak desk in her suite, the afternoon sun striping across her paperwork like quiet ribbons. Howard's revised draft was open before her, and Miriam adjusted her reading glasses with the same care she used to serve tea. This wasn't sentiment, it was strategy. Her voice, signed in ink. The clause was bold, forward-thinking, unapologetic. Upon her passing, the in-law suite would be converted into transitional housing for elder women recovering from displacement, medical hardship, or financial abandonment. No charge, no judgment. Ellie, now executor of the trust, read the new edition aloud with a low, even tone. "You're sure about this, Grandma?" "I've never been sure about anything," Miriam replied, tapping the edge of the page. "If they called me an expense, I'll become a shelter." Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of a distant lawnmower. Life, continuing, but not without her. Brian predictably erupted the moment the amendment went public. He tried to file a claim through a local attorney, citing undue influence and mental decline. The court barely entertained it. Judge Rosario, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, tossed it after one hearing. "There is no standing here, no merit, no dignity either." Howard forwarded the dismissal paperwork to Miriam with a post-it note clipped to the front. "With prejudice. May they never speak of it again." Miriam smiled, folded the letter twice, and placed it in her binder. Another door closed, quietly, completely. A voicemail from Kara arrived a few days later, 74 seconds long. "Tired. Tight. You changed. You used to love us. You used to need us. You used to be..." Click. Miriam didn't finish it. She deleted it halfway through. Then she emptied the trash folder and muted the contact. "You used to," she whispered to no one. "Exactly." In the kitchen, Cecilia carefully spread out a 3-page document on the counter. "This is the final version of your advance directive," she said. "No substitutions, no overrides. Not even next of kin can amend this." "Good," Miriam said, initialing each section with deliberate ease. "Let the record show. I stay my own." They sat together afterward, drinking warm cider with cinnamon sticks and ginger snaps. No TV, no noise, just the sound of two women who understood how silence could carry power when wielded right. The final trust amendment was signed under the watchful eyes of Mr. Reardon, who brought over his notary stamp and a fresh ink pad. The legal seal clunked down with an audible certainty. "There," he said, pressing the last page flat. "It's done." He looked at Miriam. "You just rewired the meaning of inheritance." "I didn't inherit anything easy," she said, "but I left ease behind." His lips curved slightly. "The quietest queen makes the longest shadow." That evening, Ellie returned with something wrapped in brown craft paper. She'd been gone most of the day, claiming errands and errands again. Her cheeks were pink from the wind, eyes alive. "For you," she said, placing the package in Miriam's lap. Inside was a framed photo. Simple, black border, no embellishment. It was a picture of the in-law suite's front door, sunlight streaming across it in a perfect angled blaze. The doormat said, "Still home," and the door had a hand-painted sign above the number plate. Dalton Haven. Miriam traced the edge of the glass with a soft finger. Ellie stood beside her, voice quiet. "After you, someone else will feel safe." Miriam didn't reply. She didn't have to. Her chest rose slightly, then stilled again. She hung the frame above her writing desk that night. It watched over her like a window into something permanent. Not revenge. Redirection. They'd spent years counting down to her silence, measuring each of her stumbles like they were steps toward a grave. But while they circled the edge of what they thought would be her end, Miriam Dalton built an exit sign and pointed it towards someone else. The official announcement posted at 9 a.m. sharp. The Dalton Grant for Transitional Stability, now open to applicants. A grant for elder women exiting abusive, dismissive, or dependent housing. Funded by Miriam Dalton, administered by the Fort Collins Women's Legal Aid Collective. Miriam didn't need to watch the launch. She already knew it would land like thunder wrapped in silk. Ellie did the honors. She shared it through her university's digital board with the caption, "My grandmother doesn't make noise. She makes moves." The first comment came from a sophomore named Jenny. "This is real legacy. I want to be this woman someday." The second, "Your grandma's a boss." The third, from a staff member, applause in the hallway. Everyone's standing. Ellie texted Miriam a simple message, "It's working." Kara saw it before lunch. She was scrolling mindlessly between job alerts and retail therapy when the bold serif header stopped her thumb. For a second, she squinted, not believing her eyes. There was no mention of her. No family legacy. No lineage or grateful daughter narrative. Just Miriam. Just her story. Her funding. Her mission. The air in her kitchen went thin. Her tea went cold on the counter. Back at the suite, Cecilia set the teapot down between them with an audible click. A lemon wedge floated gently in each porcelain cup, the rim still warm from the steep. "To the quiet ones," Cecilia said, raising hers slightly, "who ended louder than they were treated." Miriam clinked her teacup softly. "To the end of pretending, and the beginning of ownership." Their eyes met. There were no tears, just a fullness between them, the kind of weight that comes when you finally put something down and walk away upright. That afternoon, Miriam stepped outside into the soft light of spring. The rosemary bush she planted 3 years ago had withered to dry gray sticks, untouched since her fall. But in her hands now was a new starter plant. Vibrant, green, aromatic. She knelt down slowly, a folded towel under her knees, and turned the soil with gloved fingers. The scent of pine and crushed herb lifted around her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her breath moved evenly. Her back straightened, the roots nestled in like they'd been waiting. Behind her, wind chimes rang out from Mr. Reardon's porch. He arrived later with a small speaker and a deck of jazz CDs under his arm. "Thought you might need help breaking in the silence," he said, setting the speaker on the table beside her rocking chair. Miriam smirked. "I've been breaking things all month." They sat in easy rhythm, sipping tea as Ella Fitzgerald began to hum through the air. Reardon tapped a soft rhythm against his knee, his cane leaning against the porch rail. "You've done something rare," he said quietly. "What's that?" "You didn't just remove rot. You seeded restoration." The mail came just before dusk. One envelope stood out, pale yellow, no return address, hand addressed in careful cursive. Ellie's name was scrawled lightly in the corner. Miriam opened it slowly, the seal lifting with a gentle rip. Inside, a single page, lined paper, purple ink, looped script that trembled slightly in the strokes. "Dear Miss Dalton, you don't know me yet, but you made room for me when my own family wouldn't. I'm safe tonight because of what you did. Thank you. Alma C." Miriam folded the letter once, then again, and held it to her chest. She sat still, letting the silence around her bloom. The porch, the tea, the music, the earth, all hers, all earned. The morning light curled through the linen curtains like a quiet promise, thin, gold, and unapologetic. Miriam stirred in her bed, not from pain or assistance, but from choice. No buzzers, no knocks, just breath and birdsong. She reached for her glasses on the nightstand and slid them on with slow dignity. The suite was hers now, not just legally, but spiritually. Every inch reflected a life reclaimed, not a relic of what was lost, but a design of what remained. She padded barefoot to the kitchenette, the floor warm beneath her wool socks. The kettle clicked softly into place. Steam soon hissed from its spout like a gentle warning. This was ritual now. She prepared her own tea. 1 bag of English breakfast, 1 cube of sugar, and a twist of lemon peel. As it steeped, she sorted the mail with deliberate ease, nonprofit circulars, a letter from Howard confirming grant disbursement, and a thin cream-colored envelope with no return address. She set the last one aside without flinching. Ellie arrived just after 10, her arms full, grocery bag in one hand, an envelope bulging with new college photos in the other. "Orange juice, vitamins, and vanilla yogurt," she announced. The winning trio. Miriam smiled. "You're learning." Ellie beamed and opened the envelope. "You're in this one," she said, pulling out a glossy print of the grant board. The the Dalton name etched behind them in bronze. Miriam looked closely. We're getting the lighting right this time. They stood together by the open back door as the garden shimmered under the sun. Rows of rosemary, lavender, and red-tipped Swiss chard lined the small raised beds. It smelled like something clean, something grown. Miriam pointed toward the far planter. Still mine. Ellie nodded. All of it. Back inside, the unsigned card sat untouched on the table. The edges were overly smooth, machine-trimmed. The name on the front simply said, Miriam, in a typeface that tried too hard to look handwritten. She turned it over once, then again, no smudge, no scent, no stamp of sincerity. Without opening it, she tossed it into the small trash bin beneath the sink. It landed with a hollow thud against a used dryer sheet. Some words didn't deserve voice, and some people didn't deserve witness. In the hallway, she passed the filing cabinet. Its surface was polished and fingerprint-free. She held the key between her fingers for a moment before inserting it. Inside were her final documents: the will, the trust, the grant filings, the revised medical directive. Everything Gretchen, Howard, and Cecilia had helped her shape into a living shield. She checked one tab after another. All in order. All sealed. She closed the drawer and turned the key. Click. Final. That evening, the house was still except for the occasional creak of wood and the sigh of the wind slipping through the eaves. Ellie had gone. Cecilia had texted a goodnight. Mr. Reardon's porch light blinked once, then turned off. Miriam sat in her recliner, her tea cooling beside her, and reached for her leather journal. One last page. She flipped to the back and wrote, "Legacy isn't what they remember, it's what they can't erase." She closed the cover. In the silence, she whispered to herself, not bitter, not triumphant, just certain. He called me a rotting expense. She stood up. Her spine straightened. I gave him nothing. She turned off the lamp. The garden lights flickered on behind her through the glass. Not even my memory.